can only really speak for myself. I will always say what I believe in, free from intimidation and free from threats, etc. I always speak passionately about what I believe in. I don't feel necessarily less safe than I did a week, a month, 6 months ago. I have had threats against my personal safety and that of my family, but it's the usual loudmouth fools on social media who probably wouldn't say boo to a goose if I kind of looked at them in the face. But look, I'm speaking on behalf of myself here. I think women get it a lot worse than men. And I guess the difference between me and perhaps other MPs, and I'm not speaking on their behalf, is I this is my city. This is where I live, and certainly don't expect security when I go to the supermarket or I go to a restaurant or I take my kids to the park. And that's the way I've always engaged myself and always.
Paul, you have previously spoken about online abuse, haven't you? Particularly after the vote on Gaza, you said you've received quite a lot of abuse after calling for a ceasefire.
Well, I did. I mean, the abuse actually came not necessarily after anything I did. It's the way, I suppose, my political opponents, opposition councillors, etc., have misinterpreted what I did. But as I say, it was the loudmouth sort of people on social media. I've never been intimidated face to face or physically. But look, it's not right. And what does worry me actually is the way other potential people may be put off going into politics as a result of it. But speaking personally, and not everyone's. We don't want everyone to be exactly the same and everyone, like me, etc., etc. But just speaking personally, it's water off a duck's back, really.
Paul, looking at policy. And the policy that is flowing from the Prime Minister's wide-ranging speech on Friday, we now learn that the definition of extremism is being sought to be changed by the government to include what some might view as the quite nebulous concept of those who seek to undermine democracy. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think we have to pay attention to the security services, and they're saying that we are now less safe than we've been for a significant period of time in terms of some sort of attack or some sort of incident. And I think we have to take that very seriously. But these things always have to be reviewed and examined from time to time. And I think that's right. There's no point keeping doing the same thing that we've been doing on and on. And if there's good reasons to change the way we describe extremism, I think that's got to be welcomed.
I imagine there will be, and I'm sure there already has been, quite a lot of pushback about any notion of expanding that definition, because it could encompass people who just oppose government policy. That would be the worry, that it might actually diminish debate and free expression.
I think there's a world of difference between people who disagree with government policy or disagree with a Labour Party policy or an opposition policy, and those who wish to disrupt our democratic values. I mean, people who sit in the middle of the street, like Just Stop Oil, trying to stop us going around our daily business, blocking ambulances, blocking people trying to get their kids to school, blocking people trying to get to hospital. I think that's pretty extreme, don't you?
Certainly, it does seem, though, that this goes much beyond that and potentially could be wielded in other settings. And I do wonder if laying the groundwork for defining extremism as anything that seeks to undermine democracy, could any future government say that campaigning against government policies in some areas could fit in that definition?
Well, this is Britain, Tom. This is not a country with a strong track record of that sort of repressive government way. So I would be less worried about that. I think this is probably trying to capture those sorts of people who do the sorts of things that I just described, who would sit in the middle of the road, disrupt sporting events, prevent people going to hospital, throwing paint over priceless pieces of artwork. The nature of political protest, the nature of how people are opposing various different things have changed. And I think it's quite right that the law changes and the way we define things changes to keep up with these modern, not threats, but these modern ways of disrupting everyday life.
Now, there'll be another change in Parliament today, of course. A new colleague of yours joining the Green benches, albeit the benches opposite where you sit. What are you expecting to see when you get to Parliament a bit later today and see George Galloway introduced?
Well, let's remember, George Galloway won that election, and I think it is a demonstration, actually, of parts of the Midlands and parts of the North rejecting perhaps the two major parties, what they see as change in the way Brexit did. And if they do kind of vote for parties which want to upset the apple cart, it's not surprising sometimes, no matter how ugly that may seem occasionally. George Galloway did win that election, and he deserves to be in Parliament as much as anyone else. I think it's hugely regrettable. I wish a Conservative had won. But my challenge to the two main parties, especially my party, is we've got to learn again how to talk to those people who in 2019
But it wasn't just about, it wasn't just a rejection of the Labour Party and the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. It was because he fought his campaign on the issue of Gaza.
Well, I think obviously that was a huge part of it, but I think we'll be wrong to think two things. First off, there's a lot of nonsense talked about that if Labour hadn't had their problems and their candidate was properly endorsed, that they'd have won that election. I think that's nonsense. I think Galloway would still have won that election. And I think secondly, he attracted a significant number of votes, I would imagine, from white working class communities as well. It wouldn't have just been the Muslim community that voted for him. And a lot of it, I think, was a rejection of the status quo.